Welcome to Matters Financial and Geopolitical from a Frontier. Thank you again for stopping by. Let me start with a link to an interview I did with CGTN's Rachel Akufo about the railway. Yesterday the cargo was launched. Today the President is launching the passenger rail. And there's plenty of hullabaloo and excitement about this, the biggest project ever in Kenya's post-independence history, and I touched on some of the points in that interview. If you get a chance, please have a listen. I actually did that interview at 10 p.m. last night from this office, which used to be the Al Jazeera Bureau, but has now been taken over by Globecast. I like this photograph from Ticho Field, Magadi Flamingos, wonderful place, Lake Magadi, so remote. Lovely pastel colors, the flamingos, the color of the lake. And there's some fantastic hot springs there as well. I was looking through the Tate Modern's exhibition of one of, well, probably my favorite sculptor, Giacometti. The object of art is not to reproduce reality, but to create a reality of the same intensity. Have a look at this, Giacometti's man pointing and walking man with the fugitive dog. Pretty remarkable. He also said, I'm very interested in art, but I'm instinctively more interested in truth. The more I work, the more I see differently. I like this Femme Debut Poseurs 1. Have a look at that. And this as well, which is called Buste de Diego. And from there, I'm going to take you to Thomas Pynchon's Gravity's Rainbow, and one of my favorite poems. He's quite lyrical, he puts poems in his very dense novels. I dream that I have found us both again, with spring so many strangers' lives away, and we so free out walking by the sea. With someone else's paper words to say, they took us at the gates of green return, too lost by then to stop, and ask them why do children meet again? Does any trace remain along the superhighways of July? That's Gravity's Rainbow. And I'll come back to that momentarily. They mastered illusion to create your confusion. This is a tweet. Alien being alien. Again from Gravity's Rainbow, one of the most famous sentences, a screaming came across the sky. And according to The Guardian, a mysterious streak of purple light spotted by aurora watchers adds to a growing list of upper atmospheric phenomena. And then going back to Gravity's Rainbow, but it is a curve each of them feels unmistakably. It is the parabola. They must have guessed once or twice, guessed and refused to believe that everything always collectively had been moving toward that purified shape, latent in the sky, that shape of no surprise, no second chance, no return. Yet they do not move forever under it, reserved for its own black and white bad news, certainly as if it were the rainbow and they its children. And the reason I went back to Gravity's Rainbow was because, well, let's just take this other story, and apparently a nuclear disaster could unfold like that Oscars fiasco. Talk with experts on North Korea's nuclear arsenal, and it soon becomes clear that the biggest threat Americans face isn't an intentional act of evil, but a confluence of stupidity and error. After all, the most frightening close calls during the Cold War started with trivial mistakes, a dropped socket from a socket wrench, for example, or a training tape put in the wrong computer. Test of missile defense system shows US as credible deterrent against a very real threat, the Pentagon says. And this made me chuckle. Shocked South Korean leader Moon orders probe into US THAAD additions. Apparently, he wasn't in the loop. What would it take for Jeremy Corbyn to win the UK election? Now, I did write that piece a few weeks ago about how I thought Theresa May was going to have the biggest majority since the Second World War, but everything has turned around. Prime Minister Theresa May warned voters that if her Conservative Party loses just 6 seats in next week's UK election, Jeremy Corbyn could become head of a coalition government. We decided to go a step further using the seat calculator in Bloomberg's election tracker. We can find out what needs to happen on June the 8th to deliver an upset on election night. Short answer, it's possible, but it's still highly unlikely. For Labour to win a majority, the party would need perhaps a 10-point lead, requiring a swing of 9 points since the 2015 election. Since World War II, only Tony Blair has pulled off such a feat on his way to a 1997 Labour landslide. What's undeniable is that May's once unassailable lead has shrunk from as much as 24 points at the campaign's inception to as little as 5 points closer to the finish line. We took the YouGov PLC figures from Thursday that looked most favourable to Corbyn and plugged them into the seat calculator to see what it would yield for the underdog candidate. The result, Labour would snatch about 7 seats from the Conservatives, who would still have a narrow majority in the House of Commons, and perhaps 90 seats more than Labour. I conclude by saying Corbyn is no slouch, and I've been paying a lot of attention the last 4 sessions. The pound slumped after this YouGov Times poll, showing the Tories may miss a majority by 16 seats. Last trading at 128.02. Have a look at this chart from Holger. M16 officers complicit in creating a generation of British-born jihadists who are prepared to do anything. This is an article by Peter Oborne in the Mail, Daily Mail. All credit to the Daily Mail, because they normally wouldn't carry this kind of thing. He told me it is not right that on the one hand domestic police services are straining every sinew to protect our societies by fighting terrorism, while on the other hand elements in our and America's security services have been arming and training jihadists and colluding in terrorism. And I think it's worth reading that article, actually. And this takes me to an article by Patrick Coburn, who's saying that the venom and hysteria with which Mr. Corbyn is being accused may also suggest a well-concealed suspicion that what he says is true. Then, this morning, I couldn't get over this, President Trump tweeted, despite the constant negative press covfefe, C-O-V-F-E-F-E. And we can speculate as to what he was really trying to write there. That made me think of that photograph of Trump, Sisi, and the King of Saudi Arabia as they had their hands on the orb. And I imagine Trump was whispering, remember, the magic word is covfefe, and that will unlock, covfefe will unlock our magical powers. Covfefe, he whispered softly, just covfefe. That's Jeremy Scahill. So a lot of interest. I mean, it's just extraordinary, really is. John Podesta unloads on Trump in Politico magazine. Donald Trump is unfit for office, a president whose actions are often absolutely crazy and whose White House has a complete disregard for the truth. His firing of James Comey, the FBI director overseeing an investigation of Russian interference in the 2016 campaign, and whether Trump's advisors colluded with it, amounts to close to an obstruction case against the president. Saying that Paul Ryan and Mitch McConnell have chosen to velcro their own political fate to Trump's and won't pursue allegations against the president of their own party unless forced to do so by a 2018 midterm election debacle or further revelations. It is clear to me that the Republicans on Capitol Hill are not going to begin to turn on him at this point. The problem in the Trump White House is they have no one who really stands up to him Podesta says. He's impetuous, he's impulsive, he fires things off, and if anything, they enable him rather than trying to contain what are moves that in any other context would seem, absolutely crazy. If they're going to try to right this place and to be able to be effective, I think they need a much stronger team who can resist his impulses and tell him that he's wrong. Ultimately, it's Trump's fault and not the staff's, Podesta says, arguing the past couple of weeks have proved that Trump is incapable of doing the job. Podesta says he believes the new revelations with Trump linking the firing to the Russia case amount to close to an obstruction case either in the political context of impeachment or in the context of a criminal grand jury investigation to indict somebody for obstruction. Well, that is incredible as well. It all reeks of how the West operated in the Gulf in the 1970s, filling warehouses in the Shah's Iran with beautiful military equipment. Mr. Trump's satisfaction as he was feted and fawned over while raking up the revenues was palpable. Speaking alongside Egypt's General-turned-President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi, whose army receives an annual $1.3 billion stipend to buy American weapons, Mr. Trump said, "Love you shoes, boy those shoes man." Upon meeting Tamim bin Hamad Al Thani, Emir of gas-rich Qatar, he was almost salivating ahead of discussing the purchase of lots of beautiful military equipment because nobody makes it like in the United States. Hawking Western hardware in the Gulf has a pedigree, but this is a straitened era of diminished oil revenues, in which reform is being attempted at a moment of upheaval. There is an unmistakable sense of throwback here, even a feeling that in lieu of real policies, what Mr. Trump would like is to turn lots of regional clocks back. To start with arms sales, long a hardy perennial of Arab political repertory. The Trump White House presents the $110 billion Riyadh arms deal as an investment in American jobs and security. But Saudi Arabia is struggling against weak enemies in neighboring Yemen, the poorest Arab country, is looking to the US to constrain Iran from consolidating its strongholds in Iraq, Syria, and Lebanon. Fixated as he is on arms sales, it is not clear Mr. Trump grasps this. It all reeks of how the West operated in the Gulf in the 1970s, filling warehouses in the Shah's Iran with beautiful military equipment, not to mention nuclear reactors, and equating this with security. We know how that ended. And this is how it ended. Drawing parallels between the House of Saud and the House of Pahlavi, this photograph is of the Shah of Iran, somewhere in Panama, looking out to sea when his country didn't want him, and nor did his erstwhile supporters, the US. Massive bomb attack in the diplomatic quarter of Kabul. International markets, Goldman fund manager sees dollar rising 10% versus the yen and the euro. Dollar set to strengthen about 10%. Federal Reserve raises interest rates at least 2 more times this year, according to Goldman Sachs Asset Management. Treasury 10-year yields will climb by about 50 basis points in the medium term. The US currency has dropped 5.1% against the yen this year and 5.9% against the euro. Fed officials at their meeting this month signal they are still on track to raise rates twice more this year, describing a first quarter slowdown in the economy as transitory. That's one perspective. The other perspective is that the dollar might go a lot lower. That's on the basis of geopolitical risk. But we're in no man's land a little bit at the moment. Euro dollar 111.83, dollar index 97.41, Japanese yen 110.95. Swiss franc 0.9756. The pound had a bit of a wobble, but it's back at 128.08. The Australian dollar is 0.7450. India rupee 64.535. South Korean won, untroubled by all these missiles, 1120.95. Brazilian real 325.79. Still soft. Egyptian pound 18, kind of fair equilibrium price. South African rand 13, 10.80. Zuma's not going so easy. It got really bulled up into the Monday morning, early in the morning, got to 12.60 something. Dollar index, take a look at this chart. We're in no man's land because 99.50 is the, that pivot price on the upside. 93.50 is the price to the downside. As long as we stay in here, I don't think that we're getting a big breakout. Euro apparently touched 1.1205 after Reuters reported that the ECB may upgrade its economic assessment when it meets June 8. But what's happened? There's been a clear sentiment change, and you see that in this tweet from Jamie at Reuters. May was quite a month for Euro spec positions, the second biggest rise in long positions since the Euro's launch in 1999. Gold, 1261.73, again, no man's land. We need to get above 1300 for the bulls. We need to fall below 1250 or even 1225 for the bears. And at the moment, we seem to be in between. Crude oil, $49.19 in New York. Caveat emptor. I've got that outlier target of $32 a barrel. But there was an interesting piece in Zero Hedge which spoke about how, if you look at long positions in oil, it's gone up quite dramatically, and speculating that this is China. But then I saw another report saying China's actually run out of storage. Cocoa, look at this 5-day chart, big rebound. Is this the end of cheap chocolate? Cocoa futures surged the most on record, added 6.6% to settle at $2,037 a metric ton on Tuesday. Emerging market carry trade has handed investors 7.5% profit this year, and this has been a theme this year. Political risk has been there, but it hasn't blunted what has been a pretty dramatic rally. Investors reaping handsome rewards on emerging market currencies this year might do well to heed a warning made by Harvard economist Jeffrey Frankel, who likened carry trading to picking up pennies in front of a steamroller. Pretty good. Economic theory and history suggests the strategy of borrowing where interest rates are low to invest in high-yielding currencies is prone to the risk of a sharp reversal when too many investors pile into the trade. Strategists at Bank of America Merrill Lynch warned last week that sentiment on emerging market currencies is already reaching exuberant levels. Saxo is saying it's now time to take profit. Carry trades are notorious for risk-off unwinds, especially when positioning is crowded and correlated. Sentiment is approaching levels at which a correction is historically frequently followed. And that's what I meant when I said, the bull market in Nairobi and in other parts was externally generated and at a macro level. And that tells you why there's been this big, exuberant push into carry, which has spilled over into the continent. It was a bit of a delayed reaction. Moving to Africa, prayers in Cyrene and Libya. This is from Mr. Somerville of the BBC. Ailing African presidents leave nations in leadership limbo, says Bloomberg. Nigeria, Angola, Zimbabwe are being left in leadership limbo as their ailing rulers spend weeks abroad seeking medical attention. The presidents of the three African nations all wield considerable power, and their absence has stoked investor uncertainty and stirred talk about succession. The situation hasn't been helped by their government's failure to disclose what's wrong with them. Despite an average population age of around 17 to 19, many sub-Saharan African countries have elderly leaders in their 70s or above. The benefit of experience can be offset when illness incapacitates elderly leaders. A healthy democracy in Nigeria now has institutions which function well when the president is ill. In less transparent countries like Angola or Zimbabwe, leadership changes can prove so unpredictable that some investors are deterred from investing at all. The Angolan president, José Eduardo dos Santos, has returned from Spain, Angop said. Then in this other tweet, l'Angola favorable à une enquête internationale dans le Kasaï et doute de la tenue des élections à temps. So, President Kabila is getting the support from President Zuma and from President Dos Santos to play silly buggers with the elections. Mauritian banks seen as havens, politics, oil royal peers. Mauritian banks are becoming beacons of growth and stability in sub-Saharan Africa. Central Bank expects the Mauritian economy to expand as much as 4% this year, compared with IMF projections for an average 2.6% for the continent. Already considered by the World Bank as the easiest place to do business in Africa, Mauritius passed a law this month to promote cross-border trade and remove licensing bottlenecks, which may spur demand for credit and help soak up excess cash held by banks. Mauritius, with its reputable and strong regulatory framework alongside a sophisticated banking platform, has the potential to become a financial hub. Of course, the industry is rebounding from the collapse of Bremer Banking Corporation, and Kenya got caught up in that as well because they're a big shareholder at Britam. After the government said it had evidence the lender was involved in a 25 billion rupee Ponzi scheme. But people are bullish about Mauritius, and it really is the sort of entry point for Indian investors in particular. Majority of South Africa's ANC want President Jacob Zuma to resign. Almost 2/3 of eligible South African voters want Zuma to quit, the survey released Tuesday by research company Ipsos found. About 54% of ANC supporters say the president should step down voluntarily. 27% want him to stay in his position, according to this poll. Zuma's overall approval rating fell to 2.8 out of 10 people from 4 out of 10 in November, the lowest score obtained for any South African president measured by Ipsos since it started conducting surveys in 1993. But you see, he controls the ANC. And until the ANC unseats him, he's not going anywhere. And I think this whole situation is going to take longer to play out than definitely some folks who trade the rand think. South African oil shares up 6.92% this year, dollar versus rand back at 13.10. African corn silos overflow in the south as food crisis hits east. You remember when I was in Lusaka, I said how green it was. And if you get a good run on agriculture, the economy does well in Africa because so many people are dependent upon agriculture. Egyptian pound, 18.0015. CC obviously has been significantly emboldened since he touched the orb. Nigerian oil share up 8.95% year-to-date. Ghana Stock Exchange up 13.6% year-to-date. Chinese smugglers are buying up hundreds of thousands of illegally slaughtered African donkeys. Very interesting article in Foreign Policy. When they're not smuggling ivory and rhino horn, Africa's most notorious criminal syndicates are stealing from animals to make a 2,500-year-old traditional Chinese remedy. He was offering insane prices, like hundreds of dollars a piece, Jeremy recalled. He immediately began looking for local partners, unaware he was entering an industry that, while not technically illegal in South Africa, is dominated by black market suppliers. Across the continent, the price of donkey skins has skyrocketed in the last 5 years, fueled by demand in China. Used mainly for transport and to haul cargo, donkeys cost as little as $8 per head before the boom. Now they can sell for more than $150 each, spawning an illicit economy worth tens of millions of dollars each year based on conservative estimates. Going back to coming down to Kenya, China built railway, biggest Kenyan project since independence. I said I expect significant and positive economic spillover effects. There's been a lot of chatter about the need to move 100 million low-cost manufacturing jobs out of China, and this positions Kenya as a possible beneficiary and recipient of that transfer. Have a look at this photograph from Road Alerts Kenya, the Madaraka Express. Latest Ipsos poll shows 47% would vote for Uhuru, 42% for Raila, if polls were held today, 8% undecided and 1% would boycott. This is Ipsos. Raila Odinga had a press conference at the Dusit yesterday. We do not expect any violence, but it's not in our hands. If elections are free and fair, I don't think there would be any violence. Violence will come if somebody interferes with the electoral process. If we lose fairly, we will accept. Odinga and Kenyatta enjoy near equal support among ethnic voting blocs. If the opposition coalition boosts turnout, and this is key, turnout is key, the president's side have a much higher turnout ratio, about 10 percentage points. In swing counters, in part, I think it is because the opposition's people tend to have jobs such as watchmen, and, there's a lot of that, and those guys find it difficult to get the time off to go and vote. That's my theory. It may be able to force a runoff, said Emma Gordon of Verisk Maplecroft. Kenya's Rift Valley, old wounds, devolutions, new anxieties. The Rift Valley is the crucible of Kenya's intercommunal conflicts and often the site of confrontations among rival ethnic political blocs. Through an election alliance has brought together the two largest ethnic groups in the region, the Kikuyu and Kalenjin, and helped avert large-scale violence during the 2013 polls. This task of reconciliation is far from complete. Interesting report. International Crisis Group. Kenya threats to media ahead of August polls. Human Rights Watch in Article 19. Interesting article there as well. We've known about that. Fitch, Kenya loan rate cap, deposit floor hurt small banks. We knew that. Small banks are worst affected as they are more reliant on higher risk, higher return loans in sectors, and some are finding that their niche business models are no longer viable. Nairobi all-share has corrected 1.66% off a 9-month high over 2 trading sessions this week, but it remains up 8.46% year-to-date and in a bull market. Standard Group, under the radar, up 100% year-to-date. Think about that. NSE 20 up 7.91% year-to-date. Once again, thank you so much for stopping by, and do have a wonderful day off tomorrow, as we do here in Kenya. Thank you.